Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Torey Azure, your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to House of Brand. We're here with Aaron Huskins. Aaron Huskins is a brand strategist with BrandCraft, our agency that we have. And today, an important topic, Aaron, where we're going to talk about positioning. I am intrigued to have you as a part of this conversation because I think that you and I have kind of gone through a journey together of this brand process that now we're working on. Mm-hmm. And this idea of like, how does the positioning play a role in it? And really like one of the biggest engagements that we have with clients in our brand process is this idea of this positioning exercise.
Yeah.
And I think throughout this first episode, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a 3-part series in positioning because it's a big topic and one that's very important. And right now we're going to start with kind of just what is positioning. If I don't know when I'm watching this, I just want to know in layman's terms, like, what are you guys talking about when you're talking about positioning? And how does that apply to brand? Because I don't understand how it applies to brand. Mm-hmm. And then in our second version, our second show, we're going to talk more about your unique value. How do I know what my unique value is, and how do I say that in my positioning statement? Mm-hmm. And then finally, the last one, a little more detailed on how to write one. We're going to guide people down on how to write one. Okay. So in this first one, though, like, what is positioning? And I think I need your help in doing this, and I'll give it a stab. But through conversation, I think through layman's terms and talking people through it, they'll start to understand why you go through this exercise. Mm-hmm. So basically, positioning is a very clear understanding. So you're a business, number one. That's the important part.
Right.
Although you don't have to be.
Yeah, I mean, you get.
I would say actors are positioned.
That's true.
That music stars are positioned. Like,
yeah.
Not every country music artist sounds the same, uses the same instruments, has the same whatever it might be. So, okay, now you might be intrigued. What is positioning then? Positioning is really, and we talk about products more often than not. So we'll talk about products or services. In the marketing world, positioning is where do you fit in the market that makes you unique? How do you sit only with you and only by yourself in this certain position in the market? And then why would you want to do that? Why would you want to be in a certain position in the market and not be really alike everybody else, which might help because now they might choose you. Mm-hmm. And so positioning and how you fit in the market can be determined by a lot of different things. I mean, you could determine you fit in the market because the way that you provide customer service is this way. So a lot of modern software companies, for instance, say, well, our consumers want to be able to reach out to us via chatbot and via email and get very fast response to that. Where you might talk to somebody in an older demographic that says, I want to talk to somebody on the phone. Right. And I'll wait on hold for 30 minutes to talk to them on the phone, which would drive certain consumers mad. Right. Like, I'm not going to sit on the phone for 30 minutes. That's ridiculous. So that's a part of position. All of that can be a part of positioning. But no matter what the positioning statement says, this is who we are. This is how we fit in the market. And the business kind of operates around that positioning statement. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more detailed than a brand promise. But it doesn't set every goalpost and guideline for the whole company, but it should be very clear in what it provides. So in the process of writing positioning statements or understanding your position, how do you think it works in a brand process, and why does it matter so much as you work your way through the process?
It's funny, when I first got started doing brand work here, it really was the thing I hated the most because it's not sexy. It's like not the sexy work to do. No. It's literally, it feels non-creative, but I think eventually along the way you find out it sort of is creative. We talk a lot about brand being the foundation, of what your business is, the core of what your business is. And I think positioning really is that foundation of the brand. So you can't really know what your tagline, what your promise, any of those things are until you know who your audience is and where you are in the marketplace. So that's how I think of it. I think I would say positioning is just literally defining everything about you. Are you cheaper? Are you a value? Are you a high class or a higher end product? Are you not? Who your audience is, who the people are, who your customers are. And then how do you serve them and how do you make those? It kind of fills in all that foundation that lets you build everything else from there.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that one thing that we try and do is, one of our philosophies on brand is that we don't create brands.
Right.
All we do is uncover what these companies have done. And why we're able to do that is typically our most successful clients have had success. Like they're not trying to figure out how they're going to sell their product. They're not trying to figure that out. They've already done it. Like they have had success, and we're trying to uncover why. And sometimes they don't know why. They're like, well, we think we know why, but we don't really know. So we're in there really digging and trying to uncover their position because they don't know how to articulate their position. They're like, I don't know where we exist in the market. I know people choose us, and we have to. And in professional services, granted, and B2B, this is not always easy. Right. Sometimes it is, but at times it's really not that easy to determine why have you had success and what is that position. Okay, so why would we want to do that? Why would we want to know and uncover how they've had success and what their position is? There comes a time when these companies, and the reason they come to us is because they're at one of these inflection points where their growth is plateaued, they're not really moving forward, and they can't figure out why. And a lot of times we know that we just need to bring that message to more of their ideal client, and they're having a tough time doing that. And so you're right, like we need to know, like, okay, operationally your clients are very happy and you're getting clients, but now we need to take that baseline, move it over to marketing, and the foundation of that is let's write the position so that we know where exactly they're positioned out in the market. Sometimes doing that and writing the positioning statement, I did this a little bit when we just did the rebrand of BrandCraft. We decided some of the direction that we wanted to take it while we were positioning it at the same time and saying, traditionally, that is where we've gone, but we've had the most success with these people. Why don't we focus more on that client? And that's a business case for a client to say, I learned a lot during that process, and we actually made changes to the operations of how we were going to sell now based on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think 100% of what we ended up doing with the rebrand was because of what we came up with on that positioning side. You're right. It was that second part of it. The first part's easy. For our rebrand, for BrandCraft. Yeah, right. It is literally most of the direction was based on the fact that we had to know who we were talking to. And that was based on saying, look, we're really good at this. And I think it's interesting because you talked about, if a business grows to a certain point, I think you have your clients that have been with you for a long time. They were with you back. They know why, and it's easy to lose that why the bigger you get. And you grow these customers who knew you from your foundation. They go, I know who this guy is from the core, this founder, whoever this business is, and they were with you for a long time. But then you get bigger and bigger. Your company does sort of change a little bit. So kind of to remember and be able to remind people of who you are, that's where that positioning statement comes in handy for hiring for everybody. When you come in, we can say, look, this is who we are. This is who we want. So you don't have your salespeople going out and going after the wrong people. Your marketing's not talking to the wrong people. And so, most of everything for our brand was built on the fact that we established this is who we want to work with because this is who we think we can really help. And everything else was aligned to message to talk to that person.
You can compare this to dating, I think. Like when you're in middle school and when you're in high school and you're trying to figure out who you should date or who you like or who you don't like, you're all over the map, right? You're just trying to figure out who you might like and who you're going to date. At some point in your life, you start to get a little bit more advanced and you start to position, what do I want out of somebody that I'm going to marry? And that's, by the way, a big decision. And that's the decision consumers have to make. That we always talk about that. If you're going to hire a brand agency, it's a little bit like getting married. Like they have a lot of homework to do and they have to really know what they're looking for. And we have to be the one that provides that to them. So I think that the position is, okay, what do I expect out of this other company? And that company has to say, what do I expect out of the consumer?
Right.
What do I want them to bring to the table? What we want someone to bring to the table on the BrandCraft side is to have had some success and know how they got to where they are. Want to be better, want to scale beyond where they're at, and to be very open and honest with us and be very clear on what has got you to this point. And so, I think it is, and I thought of that reference to dating because I was like, you learn through the process of growing up you learn that. What do I want out of somebody that I might want to marry in my life? But you can't know it when you're 10 years old. You can't know it when you're 12. And if you look at a business, sometimes when they first start, they can't really know what their position is. They think they do, but they're just trying to be everything to everybody, and they haven't found their way. And they kind of haven't figured out how to say no to all those things they don't want to be, And I think that's what we help clients do in position.
Yeah.
Is to say no to all of the other things. We're only going to say yes to this, what's in the positioning statement.
Yeah.
So I guess it's important also to make it broad enough, specific, but then broad enough to execute where they can build a business off of it as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you came in and discovered there wasn't a market for it, then, well, that's not people we're talking about anyway, really. I mean, at that point, you're right, you wouldn't have a business. You've built it. There clearly is a market for what you're offering.
Yeah, so that part of positioning is often called the relevancy. Like, is it relevant? Is there an audience for it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, I guess, what we're saying is our clients have kind of proven that it's relevant. Mm-hmm. But those early stage companies, though, the ones that might be listening to this actually, and they're trying to figure out how do I position ourselves, I think, by the way, some founders and some companies do this very well from the start. They actually know exactly the position and where they're going and why they're doing it, and they often scale very fast. Mm-hmm. I would say if you look at professional services or you look at the people that start professional services companies or construction companies or whatever it might be, more often professional services and then home services, they don't want to be different. They want to be just like what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I used an accountant last time. We won't use an accountant, but I want to be something in professional. I want to be a marketing agency.
Okay.
And so a lot of people are freelancing and they might want to build an agency and they're like, yeah, I'm going to be a marketing agency and I'm going to go look at my competitors and figure out what they're doing. And I'm just going to do I'll just do all those same things. Then they start getting clients and the clients they like some of them and they don't like others and they have success with some and not others. Mm-hmm. Then they realize, you know what, I've got a background in this and I always do really well whenever I talk to, clients in this particular space. They're building their own niche in their position. They just don't even really know it.
Right, yeah.
And then we come in at some point to say, you just got to say no to all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. And you really and people told us that. And they told me that at least, where they said, why are you just doing too many things and so our BrandCraft, rebrand was taking our own medicine and saying, okay, we're going to do this. And when we do it, we're going to be okay saying no to a lot of what we've said yes to in the past.
Which is hard. I think that's even a hard part of the branding process is because we have to be kind of brutally honest about that and tell people that. And we've had them tell us that, which is good. It's good when they realize it on their own, but it's hard. It's hard from our position.
You mean sometimes actually after the brand, they come back and say, well, we're not doing that anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And they correct us.
Yeah, exactly. They'll say, yeah, well, that's not, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, so I think the idea of distinction is how they kind of get through this brand position in a way that allows them to say what they're saying no to. Like how are we distinct in a way that everyone can identify with, because we have to be. That's a very important. I always use this example. I'm not sure it's great, but people tend to maybe kind of understand it when I say it. Mm-hmm. Because I think that in professional services, B2B, home services, how am I supposed to be different? If I'm an accountant, I do accounting services, how am I going to be different?
I think you referenced it earlier. That's what you reminded me of, was when you were saying, well, I had this background or whatever was the example you gave, and so I do really well with these people. And then they just kind of build this business, don't even realize why. That's sort of what I think we're supposed to try to uncover. We ask enough questions, eventually they go, well, I had really success with these people because I had this background. Now we've got something to start building something on. Now we're figuring out why they had success with these people, and not just that you have success with those people. That's a clue to what your niche can be.
It's exactly right. And we watch people do this naturally, but typically it's more like people that are famous for whatever reason. But I'll give you an example. You have a pro skateboarder that then leaves, can no longer compete or whatever, goes into maybe brand work or they go into something else, and guess who their biggest, clients are?
Right.
Skateboard companies, people that are other skateboarders, like their personal brands, things like that. It makes it's obvious, right? We are all somewhat the same as these people that are famous, in that we have built relationships and we have things that we're passionate about, whether they're hobbies or professions or whatever it is that we're passionate about, and that ultimately is who you're going to serve the best. So don't ignore it. It also doesn't mean that needs to be where your position lies. It means there's a possibility that it could, and that's an instance of us trying to uncover it. But the example I like to give is when people start down this path of, and they do, sometimes they challenge us and say, we had a client recently, we're just not that much different.
Right.
We're not that much different. We just do what's right. And we're like, yeah, well, that's different. What does it mean to just do what's right? And that right now we're in the middle of trying to uncover that. Like, tell us what it means that you're going to do something right.
Yeah.
Because what you think is right maybe isn't what your competitors think is right.
And that's okay. If
And
what
that's
you're
okay.
if your direction of right is distinct and different, that's perfect. Let's define that. That is something that makes you a little bit unique.
Right. How do you make something?
And then how do you make sure that you do it?
Not only
you do it that way.
Not just that, but they're not messaging how it's distinct and different. They're
Right.
just saying,
It's different.
we do what's right.
Yeah.
And like the idea that two people in two different houses in two different cities in two different states have the idea of what right is, and we both agree that doing the right thing means
Right.
the same to both of us, probably doesn't. Because I bet some of their competitors that don't do the right thing, they think they're doing the right thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the analogy, which I love analogies. This idea of a burger, and that if I asked you, in fact, we've had these heated conversations in our agency. Hey, what's your favorite burger? Somebody almost always has an answer.
Yep.
You don't eat meat. You're a vegetarian.
Right.
But you still have your favorite burgers, and you'll say like, I like to go to this place,
Yep.
and they have a burger, and you explain it, and then I say, well, I like to go here, and to me, like the difference in a burger can be as simple as like one of my favorite burgers right now in our hometown. We're in Washington State. Is very simple. It's beef, it's cheese, it's jalapeno relish, and a bun. They put nothing else on it, and it's one of my favorites right now. Like that's my favorite burger. No veggies. I don't think there's many sauces on it. There's nothing except
Okay.
it's all built into those four things I talked about. Perfect burger for me. Perfect. Someone else would eat that and say, well, this is missing
Yeah.
all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like what? You got to have onion and tomato on it, which I'm like, no, I don't want any of that. And no pickles. I do. I'm a pickle fan, actually. The other thing that you can do with burgers is change the order in which you put things on
That's
the burger.
true.
Right? It can be cheese first, and then it can be meat, or you can reverse all that up. Or like McDonald's did, hey, just throw an extra bun in there. You know, when we make
Well, special sauce.
and the special sauce, right? And so people try and copy it, and then somebody will say, well, I like this version of the sauce better than that version, or I like this. The point is this. Ultimately, a burger's a burger. For the most part, we all know when we say hamburger what that means, and when we say it's our favorite, it's very nuanced things that are different in our favorite. Because really we're all eating a burger.
Right.
But it's very nuanced things. And that's the difference between, how do we say it? We talk about whether you are completely unique, which is always the best, by the way.
Sure, yeah.
If you're completely unique, we have an easy time positioning you. Like it's super easy.
Right.
Messaging comes along really fast. But it's this idea that we can be slightly distinct.
Yep.
There's just something distinct about what we do that's different than our competitors, but that matters.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Your burger reference, Burger King is flame broiled. That's really the only difference. I mean, really. They
But how
might
much?
get
But how
mad,
much do they lean? Or they used to? Remember how much they used to lean on that?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Like it said it on their sign.
Yeah.
That it was flame broiled.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It sounds healthier or something.
Yeah.
Different flavor, whatever it is that you want. You want that flame broiled flavor. Yeah, it makes it sound like you're getting a different experience. When in fact, I mean, you're eating a burger, like you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is one way that we talk to clients and say, okay, we understand that for the most part, you're an accountant and you do accounting services, but there's something different when you walk through your front door and when I talk to the front office and when I interact with you here and even with the products and services you've offered us. I'm thinking of our accountant right now, and they're a bit different in the services they offer and how they package it and some of the other resources that they give us on the accounting side. So they're positioned differently than some of the other accountants we met with, and we ultimately chose them to be our accountant for our agency. And it was for reasons like that. They were just slightly positioned and distinct in certain ways, but ultimately everybody I met with in our search for an accountant was all qualified.
Right.
They could all do the work. I would have been probably happy with all of them, but the one I chose was for very distinct reasons.
Yeah, maybe this is a good example of bad positioning. It's the people who do that, and we always say, "Look, that's the bare minimum." Like, oh, well, we're all qualified would be a terrible thing to say. Like, well, okay, but shouldn't everybody be qualified? I can't imagine hiring an unqualified accountant. Why would I do that when there's qualified ones out there? So I think we have to make sure that that's a part of like bad positioning. Is like, well, we're always going to have qualified. Well, that's great, of course, but that's really, what do you always say?
It's table stakes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like
right.
this is, if everybody's going to sit down and gamble, it takes $50 to get your first hand down. That's just table stakes.
Right.
And table stakes in this case are right. Customer service, qualified people. Hey, we're all CPAs. You better be.
Right.
Like, I mean, you go down the list, and pretty soon everyone's like, but the rush to sameness is why positioning is so important and why we make sure people stop and say we have to be so distinct and have no other choice in our position. And when you can also deposition others when you do it. In other words, you say, because we're so distinct, we do it better, that way's old. You shouldn't do it that way anymore, and you deposition them from that. But is that we have to be so distinct that you don't have another choice. And I think what our many of our clients, and this is why I think professional services, when we do it, can be so challenging. What do they always want to be? That's not true. I don't think they want it. What do they gravitate towards all the time? And I'll answer it because I think there's so many things, you'll probably guess a million that they try and gravitate to. But what I'm referencing here is they're always trying to be like their competitors as much as they can, rather than different from their competitors. So, I mean, I'll just talk to, there might be some marketers in the crowd or brand people in the crowd that have ever, I'm sure they've done this, but you're an agency, you've got a website, and what do? You go check out all the other agencies. What are they saying and what are they doing? And is that important, what they're saying and doing? I don't think it hurts for research to know what some of your competitors are doing or what they're messaging. And in fact, with our new brand process, we looked at a lot of other people who we thought were positioned well to say, what are they saying and what are they doing? But what you don't want to do is go look at the people you don't want to be necessarily and say, well, we'll just say all those same things and we'll make sure that we message, oh, they're saying that we'll do those 5 things too. You are really, it's just a rush to sameness. And it's a rush to no differentiation. Ultimately, what's going to happen is you're going to spend a lot more money on marketing. Now you have to differentiate yourself, and you can spend money on marketing, and actually they hire the other firm because they're like, well, they were the same. Like you guys are both saying you're the same, so I'll just find the lowest cost.
Or the larger team.
Or
whatever it is, Yeah,
at that point, now the consumer's filling in all the blanks. Where you should be filling in the blanks for them.
You could instead position yourself against and say, well, here's why you should choose us because we're smaller, we give you more, whatever it is, whatever that differentiator is. That's a kind of table stakes one as well. But again, it's how you say it.
So I would say our experience has been great with our client base, as they have taught us as we've gone through this, how we get out of them what we actually need. And sometimes we have certain clients that do better with some of the questions we ask them in the written form. Like they tend to share really well in that format. And then we get in the positioning exercise where we want them to talk, and sometimes maybe not so much. Others completely opposite. Maybe we don't learn as much in our written portion where we ask them questions to answer, but they really uncover a lot when they talk. They tell us things, and we're like, sometimes often late, like while we're eating lunch. If you remember that. That we had a client drop a major differentiator on us after we had completed the positioning exercise and we were eating lunch. And I think they tell you, or they said it, they were telling you a story?
I don't remember how it came about specifically, but we were just eating lunch, and I think at some point we just said, like, no, I believe you. It's just we got to figure out, like, how do you make sure that happens? If we can figure out that, and he just goes, well, that's why we did, et cetera. And everybody kind of stopped eating and was like, whoa, well, that was big.
He told us, so this, we
I didn't know if you want to get specific.
No, we won't tell who the client was, but this particular client told us, Aaron has said it, and then they said, well, the way that we onboard these people is we do this, and it was developed in this proprietary process. Like no one else does it but us. And I remember thinking, you didn't think that was that should have been brought up earlier in our conversation where we asked you what was different about what you did, in which they gave us a lot of table stakes. Well, remember the conversation we had that this was a financial services firm, and we kept talking about this word fiduciary, and we kept saying, but every one of your competitors is saying that they're a fiduciary, and you're telling us they're not, yet they're saying they are. I don't think we should use that term. And they were having a hard time getting past that. Like, well, really, that's it. That's what our core is that we're a fiduciary anyway. And we're like, there's other things. And they did tell us some good things, but that one was one just where we both were like, man. And maybe questioned a little bit too, like, why didn't that come out earlier? Why didn't we get that out of him earlier?
It's exactly what we were just talking about, though, with your example of a guy who's like, well, I used to be in this and he's being that. This is it's not the exact same example, but it's that idea that you forget why it is that you're able to do this. You just know what you're able to do. And sometimes I think that's where it's kind of funny is they're almost giving you, this is our UVP, and we're going, but it seems like a table stakes UVP until you go, but we have a way of doing it. Again, we have a way of making this burger.
I think when we roll our eyes as an agency the most is what you just described. When someone says, hey, we just launched a new website, or we're doing this, and it's like a big reveal, And all we see when we look at it is table stakes down
Yeah.
and it's just like, man, you word it differently whenever you see it. You're always like, man, I don't know. I just feel like they missed an opportunity. And that's kind of, I think, maybe you've used that term before,
Yeah.
but something along the lines of, man, they could have done so much more. They could have done more with it. And I think that's when we're critiquing, when we see things
Right.
launched, and I don't think we're critiquing our competitors. We're just looking at them and saying, man, you missed an opportunity to say something really unique. And instead you're saying what everyone else is saying. Like, why would you do that? Because you spent a bunch of money on the website. You rebranded, but you didn't change any messaging. It just says the same thing as before. So positioning is the base of that messaging change that we're about to make in the brand process. And for us, messaging is, I don't know what percent you might think. Messaging 70 or 80% probably of our brand process.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. We put a lot of focus on it. I like to believe our clients take the most pride in the messaging and the new platform that we create for them. But notwithstanding, every time they see a new design or a new logo or anything like that, it gets the most attention, it seems like.
Yeah.
And it might be even subconscious. They don't realize that they love the messaging. They're just like, oh, it looks great. But also I'm engaged and I'm reading it. So there's that.
I like the way that you put it. You always describe a brand guide as like a lens to look through, and I think having a photography background like you do, that makes a lot of sense, because a different lens literally will make things look different. It changes the shape of, like you say, you don't want to be shot on a wide lens up close, right?
Yeah.
No one likes how they look that way. I think this is our way of saying, when you give that messaging, that sample messaging, it's not like we're saying this is the only thing you can ever say is these 7 or 8 examples of how you talk about it, but it gives you a lens to go, this is how we talk about, this is who we are. And you're looking at it. When you look at it that way, you see now everyone sees the company the same way. Your employees do, your customers do, and that's what we mean when we say we give it a lens. I think that's an interesting. I haven't heard anyone else describe it that way, so I think I don't know if non-photographers get that, so I'm hopefully spelling it out for people who aren't. But I think that's what you mean by that.
Yeah, I do. I think that if you can somehow write marketing campaign messaging, that when somebody reads it, number one, it intrigues them and they like it. And then we don't do this and consumers don't see it, but if then you could put the positioning statement next to that and they could look at them both and they would get it.
Yeah.
And go, oh, I get it. Now I understand. And eventually consumers do get it.
Yeah.
They like, oh, everything they're talking about actually lines up with this position. And that makes a lot of sense. Now I see who they serve and why they serve and what they do.
Yep.
And they might not get it in the first campaign, but they might get it in the second or third where they're like, oh, now I get it. Consumers are much smarter, I think, than a lot of us give us credit.
I agree.
In fact, our clients sometimes, like you said, start holding us to account and saying, whoa, wait a minute. Nope, not that anymore. Now we're this.
Yep.
Which is great.
It is great, yeah. I actually recently had a client rewrite a script I wrote for a video, and there's a part of me that just the pride, I'm just like, but it was good.
Yeah.
And it was on brand, and I said, well, shit, this means it works. Actually, I'm proud because I wrote the brand guide, and now you wrote a script.
Yeah.
And it's on brand.
That's great.
Yeah, that's an awesome sign. Yeah.
Okay. So to close this out, this is our step 1 in positioning. I think we had great conversation. I hope you guys learned something, but we're going to end on this. A question for you, Aaron. For our small business, and this mid-market businesses, which is our core client, what do you think the biggest challenges are that we've seen when we go through one of these in-person positioning exercises? What are things that, if you could warn somebody or talk to somebody about writing their own positioning statement or trying to go down the path of saying, I want to define our position, what do you think the biggest challenges you've seen in that process for our clients?
I think it's something we talked about a lot already, which is I think it's that UVP, the unique value proposition, is the hardest part. I think it's definitely easy to know who you are, the name of your company, and what you do. Finding out who you serve is kind of a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but usually we can get to that pretty quickly. We can identify who you have success with, not sex with, who you have success with.
We'll leave that one in.
Yeah, that's fine. But that unique value proposition, and I think if I could give advice on it, I would say the way I try to do that is...
Well, first, before you do that, so definitely we want that. Like, what do you think explain the challenges first. Like, because they have problems with it, what do they end up doing that then we help them try and not do?
I think what you end up doing is you end up thinking what's unique about you isn't. I think it's what you think you've always done, it's worked, and you've always said it this way. And then all of a sudden your marketing stops working, and you're like, well, what worked before? And it's like, well, it worked when you get to this point. But to grow to new people who don't know you as a company, or to get to a bigger market, or to grow your business, you've got to start finding a way to say it. And it doesn't mean that the value necessarily is wrong, But it's, again, this is where it gets into the advice. But you need to think about, the way I do is I go, well, then how do you make that happen? And I think once you get there, that's when you find that distinction or that unique, thing. Again, we put the lettuce on the top of the burger. It's the first thing we do. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, you found this is why we do this. This is how we make sure we do this.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice on how to try to think differently, I would tell people. But that's certainly the hardest part, is getting people to say, well, we're trustworthy. Okay, cool. How are you trustworthy?
Exactly. Yeah. I think you nailed it. I think I'd probably answer the same way, that the biggest thing that we try and get clients to do in this process is not say, look, our most unique value is customer service.
Right.
We just have the best customer service. And if they do say that, we really challenge them and try and break that down closer and closer and closer to see what they mean and see if there's something else we can say instead of that. We don't always want to tell our client they're wrong. Instead, sometimes we say that's not good enough.
Yeah.
It's not good enough just to say customer service.
Right.
You're not wrong, but that's not good enough. We need to say something different, and we try and get that out of them.
Well, I like when you say, I believe you.
I do believe you.
Yeah, I believe you,
Yeah.
but prove it to me.
Prove it to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think that, that's the way I would go about it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Aaron. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have another episode, which will be Positioning for Success, which is lesson 2 in this positioning series. Later.